The second red engine is another one of the nameless jobbers within the Railway series.
He was briefly seen in the sad story of Henry, where he attempted to push out a stubborn green engine out of the tunnel, but to no avail. Now, in the fandom, fans have believed that this engine is related to James' red engine, due to the fact he looks very identical to him. But what if I told you that is not the case? And I'll show you why. In the sad story of Henry, the red engine attempted to push Henry out of the tunnel when the stubborn green giant refused to move. And the last time we potentially see him was in the book Henry the Green Engine. Now, diving into his origins through Audrey and the illustrations, despite them being inaccurate, in Audrey's original sketches of the sad story of Henry, in an illustration where Henry is being pushed out by an engine, we can see that the engine looks to be a 440 like Edward. Now, based on this illustration, we can assume two things. Either this is what the second red engine was meant to look like, or this engine was actually meant to be Edward. Since we never got a definitive answer by Audrey, I'll let you guys debate this. Was this really the red engine, or was this meant to be Edward? In 1945, William Milton was the first illustrator to illustrate the Railway series, and he illustrated the red engine, at least both the first and second red engine, as 462s, trying to make them look the same, as if they're meant to be the same character. When Dolby was selected as illustrator for the Railway series, he would illustrate the story James Red Engine and would re-illustrate the two books Thomas the Tank Engine and the three Railway Engines. In the three Railway Engines, the two red engines seem to look different from each other now. Now with the new illustrations in place by Dolby, when people look at the red engine in this illustration, they assume that he's related to James and this would translate into fan content. However, there might be a chance he may not be related to James. And now we are on to the next part. Now, the first reason for why this red engine may not be related to James, potentially, is because there's not much information on him. Even when looking him up on Google or looking through the iOS book, on Google, there's not much information about him other than the theory that he might be related to James. And on the iOS book, it made it very clear that James was the only one to receive the pony truck and extended front modification. Now after hearing this, you're probably going to say, oh, but the illustration speaks otherwise. Well, here's the thing. Audrey stated many times not to take the illustrations far too seriously, so we can say that the illustrations for this one are inaccurate. Going by this, we can say that the red engine is some other basis, perhaps similar to Klaus 28. Speaking of which, let's get to that point, shall we? Getting on to this point, I found some alternate bases that this red engine could be aside from the Klaus 28, since personally I don't believe he needs to be related to James just because he looks similar to him. But anyhow, here are the bases I found that could match the red engine. So on the list, we have the LNL J11, built between 1901 to 1902. Speaking of twos, we have the Midland Railway Johnson 3F, built between 1875 to 1908. Ironically, there is an interpretation of the second red engine with this exact basis, named Johnson by Demon of Nowhere. The Furnace Railway D5, built between 1913 to 1920, and the ROD Dean's Goods, built between 1883 to 1899. These engines share the open cabs, 060 wheel configuration, boiler type, albeit different in terms of height, and fireboxes. All these features that could easily match the red engine. Now after this, some of you are probably typing, oh, but he has a front bogie truck in the illustration, and why would some other company try the extended front pony truck modification? Well, it doesn't have to be that way, because according to Audrey, the illustrations are inaccurate. Which means this may not be what the red engine might look like, and that we can have any 060 in Britain, or even one of the existing 260s that were back in the 1910s and 20s. The possibilities are endless. But now, I think it's time we get into final thoughts. Shall we? To be honest, I still believe that just because the second red engine looks identical to James doesn't mean it has to be James' sibling. After all, there are a lot of designs that could compete with the Class 28. Not to mention, Audrey did state numerous times that the illustrations, especially involving the background characters, were completely inaccurate. So this means we don't have to take the Class 20 idea of the Red Engine being serious. What do you guys think? Sound off in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!